Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the current political situation of the country, of course, in the aftermath of the elections on the 8th of February. We're still nowhere near in terms of what it is going to be the final decision as to who is going to be taking the important seats as part of the government. There are, of course, negotiations underway between the PML-N and the PPP, and a number of talks have already gone place with a lot of things, of course, with reference to who it is that is going to be taking the top positions, the federal cabinet being under discussion. The PPP is sticking to its stance with regards to not being part of the cabinet. Of course, it's also taking a look with regards to what it is that is going to put forward as its own terms and conditions of supporting the PML-N and its prime ministerial candidate, something perhaps which has still not seen any agreement with the PML-N. This is, of course, something that is pointing to further delay in the formation of the government, with Mr. Bilawal Bhutto also talking about a stalemate with reference to what decision is going to take place, saying that their stance is firm, and if anybody else needs to change their stance, that is the only way that things will move forward. Of course, they're looking at the positions of the presidency and the top positions in both houses of the parliament. But of course, with reference to the cabinet, the PPP had previously also said so and is currently also staying away from these positions. The PML-N, on the other hand, of course, earlier reports have had cited, is trying to convince otherwise. But whether or not they're going to be successful in that and what is going to be the final decision between these parties is something that remains to be seen. However, it does seem that both the committees of the different political parties are sitting together with reference to different agendas that are under discussion, which is again something that has been talked about. But how much is that going to actually help in the substantial negotiations underway, of course, remains to be seen. At the same time, we also know that the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is moving forward with its own negotiations with reference to what Barrister Govt keeps talking about, the possibility or the assurance that they're going to be forming the government in Punjab, in the centre and in KP, saying that the PTI-led, the PTI-backed candidates are going to be moving forward with this decision. Of course, they've put in their own candidates for the top positions as well, and at the same time, they have decided to join the Sunni Ittihad Council. How much more will be the decisions involved and the steps to be taken with regards to the numbers that they need to achieve this, and whether or not they're going to be engaging with other political parties that they have categorically refused to do so earlier, is also something that remains to be seen. Amidst all this, there is also, of course, concerns with regards to rigging in elections, for which we also saw the PTI and the JUIF join hands in an unlikely alliance that, of course, also sparked its own controversy and, of course, led to stirs among PTI supporters as well. But what exactly is the situation on ground? How much of an impact do these reports and these allegations of rigging have on the larger scale of the elections? And what is going to be the future course of actions, specifically with regards to the role of the election tribunals and the Supreme Court? We're going to be looking at that in further detail and trying to understand what that is and how it's affecting the negotiations underway with top political parties as well, with reference to formation of the government. This is going to be our focus in the show today, and for this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Raja Faisal. We have not been joined by Farooq Patafi today. He's a bit unwell, and we wish him a speedy recovery. But we have been joined by Barrister Shabbir in the studios, and welcome to the debate. And finally, you're with us in the studios. It's good to have you here. You've been a regular at our show, and also Mr. Muneeb Qadir, who's a political analyst. He's joined us online. Thank you, Muneeb, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. I'll start with you, Muneeb, with reference to the negotiations of the discussions between PML-N and PPP. There are, of course, reports coming in with reference to different stances that both parties have been taking. We, of course, know what the PPP has been saying previously as well, and what it has pointed out towards at this point in time as well. And then, of course, what the PML-N wants in terms of its support. The PPP leader has clarified that there is going to be no change in their stance. But, of course, we've seen previously as well that pre-election stances were different and stances currently were different now. But it doesn't seem to be something that will be in PPP's favor to do so, and they seem to have a strategy in mind. Can you help us understand what exactly is going on behind this decision, and what is the rationale of the PPP, and whether or not do you think there's any possibility of success in these negotiations with the party taking a different stance?
So there have been at least 4 rounds of negotiations between PML and People's Party, and as Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has warned today, there might be a stalemate if there is no flexibility shown from the other side. But I could say that if there is no flexibility shown from either side, this stalemate could persist. What with the looming deadline of 29th February, by which time the National Assembly should convene and has to convene, because I mean that's when the 21-day period and time limit ends since the election. So there is a lot of anxiety among the population and the political parties. I think they are all trying to get the best deal out of whatever they can get. And the thing is that PMLN has also changed its stance a lot of times. They have showed a willingness to go into opposition and not form a government, and then they say that they are still vying for forming government at the center and many of the provinces, and PTI has done the same. And in between, I think that a major game changer is People's Party, and could be People's Party, because it's by forming an alliance with them that any political party or any block of independent candidates could come into power. Now, of course, that is a possibility that the PTI has ruled out. So even though they might have the highest numbers or the lion's share of the votes, as the saying goes, they have ruled out any possibility of forming a coalition with People's Party, and they have been vying for, getting the support of religious right-wing parties. Most recently being with Sunni Ittihad Council. But between PMLN and People's Party, despite there being an impasse and they're not being able to form a conclusion even after 4 rounds of talk, there is still a possibility that the coming days, just like Mr. Kamarzaman Kaira of People's Party has indicated, that by 27th, 28th February, something concrete is expected to have been agreed upon by both PMLN and People's Party. And in any event, we know that at the very least, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has indicated that he is going to support PMLN in forming a government as far as the magic number of 169 is concerned in the National Assembly. But whether they would be power sharing within the government, that idea is something which Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari doesn't seem to be very comfortable with, and he has announced just yesterday that he's rejected any possibility of him being the Prime Minister for the last 2 years of the upcoming government or coalition with PMLN, possibly with the first 3 years of premiership resting with the PMLN. That is something that Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has ruled out, but one never knows that what kind of compromise might be reached. But we need to see.
There are also reports been saying that the reason why this stance is being taken by the PPP is that eventually it's going to push PMLN in such a spot where they're not going to be willing to form a coalition government, and then they might join hands with the PTI-led backed independents, and so that's going to be a completely different scenario for the PPP, where it can put forward their own leader for prime ministerialship. Do you think that could be something in the long run for PPP?
Like I said, this is politics, and there's always room for flexibility. And Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari has said as much today outside the Supreme Court that if you don't get to compromise, there is only the possibility of a stalemate. So I think anything is possible, but right now the only thing we know is that there are certain positions that the People's Party is trying to negotiate over, especially getting the presidency and getting the position of speaker within the Houses of Parliament. That's what we know up till now. But whether they would also enter into a proper coalition government and trying to secure positions within the cabinet, ministries within the cabinet, the possibility could be there. I can't rule that out completely, going by the history of politics in the country and going by the history of these political parties in particular. But currently there is an air of uncertainty.
Right. And Barrister Shabbir, while the PPP and the PMLN talk to each other, there's of course the PTI who's saying that they're going to be forming the government in Punjab, in the centre and in KP, and it has of course decided to join the Sunni Ittihad Council. But what exactly does that mean in terms of actual steps to forming the government? Joining a political party, of course the PTI back candidates had to choose one party or the other. But in terms of what is the possibility for the PTI to actually do that and be able to do that, especially in terms of the numbers that it needs, is that a real possibility?
You see, the mandate which is given to PTI clearly falls short of the mandate which is required to form a government. And in this case, what is extremely important is that Pakistan People's Party is in such a position, like Muneeb pointed out, that it has a key position that without Pakistan People's Party, no party can form government. Why I say that is because obviously an alliance between PTI and PMLN, no one is foreseeing that, so let's rule that out. The possible alliance of Pakistan People's Party can be with PTI, or it can also be with PML-N. So, but in the present,
But the PTI refuses to talk to PPP.
I mean, which is why it is very unfortunate that in the earlier round they refused completely, and then later they were saying that they may form government with Pakistan People's Party. So this is the kind of political inflexibility which PTI at this point in time unfortunately suffers from, and if there were clarity, then perhaps it would serve them right if they were flexible for the country. And you said, in terms of whether they can form a government, even if they have formed an alliance with Sunni Tehreek and some other political parties, the problem remains. I am of a legal opinion, and as unfortunate as it is that they were deprived of their symbol, I don't see how they would get any independent seats. The law does not provide for it. So even if it is any other party, the deadline for submitting your reserved seats and an application has ended, and it cannot be extended. You cannot change or amend that.
Right, and Faisal, this of course is a serious problem, but whenever we talk about the PTI, whenever the leaders in itself also talk about the PTI, they keep on referring to these seats. And if this is something that is not a possibility, why is it that it's being reported or it's being talked about? And of course, with the public also having one hope or the other with reference to the future of who it is that's going to be leading the government. Secondly, with regards to the way that we've seen PTI stance previously with parties such as the PPP and the PML-N, in the current scenario and in the current situation, what possibilities then exist, especially if there is in fact a stalemate between the PPP and the PML-N?
Yes, and now obviously if we look at the current political situation, and at the same time if we look at what narratives are being maintained by PTI itself, one can clearly understand that they are still struggling to come to terms with it, that they have less seats, and obviously their first priority is that they want all of the seats which they have put the appeals for on the basis of Form 45. They want their rapid decisions on the basis of Form 45. Why I say this? Because if a normal candidate goes for a recount or goes for a Form 45, then that is so simple, and obviously it can go into litigations, and of course it can take time, and sometimes it takes around 5 years. We know that even in the previous government, I mean Qasim Suri, he was someone who had a case against him regarding rigging, but that actually was prolonged so long that the government tenure was over and the decision was taking place after that. So in here it's entirely a different situation. PTI maintains that now when they have the candidates from the other parties standing with them with the same Form 45s, so they say that they have a very good case, and that case can be decided rapidly before the government is being formed. Why are they saying this? They believe that eventually government, the right on the government is only of that political party that has the mandate from the people, and to them, according to their narratives, people of Pakistan have actually voted for them rather than other two parties. So now if as they say that they are standing around 170 or 180 seats, they can easily form a government if that mandate is given to them through our courts or whatever the process, or this current interim setup can be prolonged till till the time when all of these seats and all of these decisions are coming out from the ECP on them seats. If they have 170 or 180, let's say their narratives are true, then of course they won't be needing anyone to form a government. They are in a position to form a government without even getting the reserve seats. But if that reserve seat decision, as we know that Sunni Third Council has already applied for reserve seats of the minorities and the female seats and all of them, if they go through and if they do get that fair share in the parliament, then of course once again they are in a very good position to sort of join hands with others and attract others to form the government, and they can also claim over the few of the candidates, independent candidates, who initially contested elections on with their help. Of course, in their website, in their party, they have submitted the sort of oath that they will be aligned with the party in every decision by the party.
Let me actually put it this way: who do you think has the weakest bargaining power at this moment?
To be honest, PML-N.
Absolutely.
PML-N. Why? Because even, I have been talking to my sources within People's Party, and they are rightly saying it so. They say that we do not, their priority is not to sit with PML-N. Their priority is to sit with the independent candidates from PTI-backed party, because they believe that the actual mandate was actually thrown towards them because there was a wave. And People's Party, don't forget that People's Party is a party, a democratic party that can still be considered as a national level party. Reason being, they are contesting from Chitral to Karachi, and they are everywhere. They at least contest everywhere, and they consider themselves not from a Sindh party, they consider themselves party from a political party of Pakistan. So that is why they want to actually go along with their democratic norms they have been and ethics they have been following throughout their political history, and they want to sit with the independents. And this is off the record. I keep on getting calls from few of the leaders from People's Party who simply say that we believe that mandate was actually given to them. So if we want to sit with somebody, then we should be sitting with them rather than anywhere else. And that is the only reason that they don't want to be part of this cabinet, the coming up cabinet. They want to secure the constitutional positions, and they were seeking earlier, obviously, all four governors of the provinces. They have been asking for that as well. But when it comes to being part of the cabinet, they don't want to be part of it at all, because they say that when PDM's government was there and they were part of it, then their sort of campaign, electoral campaign, during that they have been facing questions from people of Pakistan, because people of Pakistan, they were telling them that you were part of that government.
Are they trying to play safe, or they are just waiting PML-N to give in?
They are playing safe. At the same time, they are playing democratic as well. Because in a country that is running through obviously these kind of crises, even in these crises, they are staying democratic, and they are believing on the mandate, which is the actual mandate which is given to PTI's candidates.
Okay, Muneeb, I have two questions for you. One, with reference to, of course, the fact that a number of days have passed since the elections, and of course we don't have a final decision yet as to what is going to happen. Is there any timeline that we're looking at? Is there anything legally that asks, or at least ethically asks these political parties to come to a decision? Secondly, with reference to the PML-N and the role that we see it's currently standing in, what do you make of the talks with reference to some of their own political leaders, a lot of the party followers and of the people at large, who also talk about the issues with regards to the public mandate, and whether or not these political parties would rather benefit from seeking something which a lot of people are questioning is actually theirs or not, and stepping away from it? Do you think, with the kind of pressure that perhaps is being created, and the fact that the conversations with PPP are going nowhere at the moment, that eventually this can be a decision that the PML-N takes, and in any way is that something that the party should be considering?
So responding to the first question you asked, the law is clear that after a general election result has been announced, within 21 days the National Assembly has to convene, and so by early March even the Prime Minister should have been elected, and we should be clear on who the Prime Minister is. But that is if things go according to plan and according to the law, and we don't know how things might turn out. Perhaps a week from now on we might be in a better situation to know what direction we're headed towards. But coming to your second point, like I said, even my other fellow co-panelists have been stressing on the fact that People's Party is at least in a position, which is a very strong position, to be able to leverage its influence on both the PTI independent candidates as well as the PMLN, because ultimately being able to form a successful or a strong or a stable government, or coming to any remote possibility of that, you need to have People's Party by your side. Now, I would wonder whether People's Party would have any assurance that PTI-backed independent candidates are going to stick to their stance if they were to, show some flexibility and were to extend an olive branch to the People's Party to form a government collectively. Because, I mean, having hinted towards going soft on People's Party previously, they had again withdrawn from the possibility of forming a coalition government with People's Party. They've slighted People's Party. They've snubbed People's Party time and again. So, I mean, practically speaking, if not looked at from an ideal perspective, People's Party perhaps could have better chances at whether getting the seats in National Assembly or giving enough support to PMLN and not becoming part of any power sharing agreement, or otherwise becoming a part of power sharing government. They stand a better chance if they were to ally themselves with PMLN, because at least they've had an experience of that in previously in the PDM government. And PMLN does see People's Party, despite their conflicts every now and then with each other, PMLN does see political party as a legitimate political force. A recognition which PTI has up till now completely denied. And just as Barrister Shabbir also said that majority of numbers, they do reside with the independent candidates, but there is a lot of inflexibility from PTI, and perhaps that is reflective of the fact that PTI isn't very much in favor of parliamentary style politics at all anyway. So that is reflecting in the fact that they are seeking to ally themselves with the lesser known parties like MWM, and even there they are very inconsistent. Sometimes they suggest that they might be entering into an agreement with JUIF only for things not to materialize later on, and now with the Sunni Ittihad Council. So the only thing that the PTI has been consistent in is their inconsistency. So, I mean, that means that there's a higher chance of PMLN and People's Party both showing flexibility towards one another and both choosing to come into a power sharing arrangement of some sorts. Now, whether that really happens or not, like I said, we'll be in a position to comment more clearly on this after a week from now on.
All right. Barrister Shabbir, with reference to the rigging in elections and, of course, the allegations that keep coming up, we also have people who claim and who talk about what really had happened and what really are the possibilities of post-poll rigging. And I want to understand what exactly is required for that to actually happen, because a lot of the allegations that we've seen in previous elections around and even in this time point towards pre-poll rigging, and of course this is something that we've seen before as well. But whether or not there is an actual possibility of post-poll rigging after the ballot box has been sealed and the last vote has been cast, what sort of hindrances are there in actually establishing the case that has actually happened? Secondly, there is now also a conversation with reference to the election tribunals or the Supreme Court, and whether or not different political parties should have approached the Supreme Court directly, and help us understand whether or not, even if that had been the case, eventually the election tribunals would have been involved. Thirdly, also with regards to the timeline of election tribunals, is there any way to be able to expedite this process? Because whenever there is talk of election tribunals, there's also the talk that now this is going to go along for a long time, and there's going to be a lot of delay in these results actually coming in. Is there a way to actually expedite that and ensure that it's been done in a certain timeline?
Sana, thank you for asking this question. This is a very interesting question. Why? Because it clears uncertainty at this point in time. Let me go step by step. At this point in time, for example, tomorrow, there are 42 cases which are just from Karachi, which are filed before the Election Commission of Pakistan. Now, obviously, the PTI, on account of perhaps misinformation or unawareness or lack of knowledge of law, their supporters would be expecting that they are going to win those cases. In other words, the notifications which have been issued already of returned candidates are going to be reversed by the Election Commission of Pakistan. Now, let me explain the possibility, or legally speaking, the chances of that happening. The Election Commission of Pakistan, under the Elections Act, has an extremely limited role once the notification is issued. So we divide the law into two parts. if a notification of a returned candidate has already been issued, which you would know that by now almost of all constituencies, barring one or two or a few, notifications have been issued. Now, once that happens, the powers of the Election Commission under the Act are extremely limited. The requirements are that the Election Commission has to conduct a summary inquiry, and if grave illegalities which are floating on the surface of record have been committed and the Election Commission is satisfied that they have been committed, then the Election Commission can declare the entire poll void. It is very important. Even if that happens, the Election Commission has to declare the poll void, which means the re-elections are to happen. Now, the PTI is not saying or assuming that out of these 42 seats, even if the Election Commission, for example, is convinced re-election is going to happen. What they are assuming is that they are going to be declared as returned candidates. Now, that is not a possibility, even if the Election Commission were to exercise jurisdiction in their favor. Let me also shed light on what has been the law consistently on this power. This power, which is now defined in Section 9 of the Election Act, was previously Section 103AA of Representation of the People's Act. Now, so far there have been, Muneeb might correct me if I am wrong, 4 to 5 instances in the history of Representation of the People's Act from 1976 till today, when the Election Commission has exercised this power. So, it is not for any political party, God forbid that for PML-N or PTI or PPP, the Election Commission is not exercising this power. But the nature of this power is so special that without leading evidence, without it's your case versus mine, obviously the Election Commission cannot declare the poll void. Lately, what happened in Asjad Malli's case, which is very famous in Daska. Now, the threshold, allow me to explain, was that in that case, not just the polling agents, the presiding officers were kidnapped. 40 presiding officers, admitted position were kidnapped, they were beaten up, and only then the Election Commission was satisfied and the Supreme Court upheld that fine, this is one such case where the Election Commission would overturn or would disturb the elections. So, in present cases, none of those cases satisfy the threshold. Also, let me say, it might sound very inhuman to say this, but I was preparing for some of the cases which are fixed tomorrow, and my memory was refreshed that previously, these are by far good elections, because in previous so many elections there used to be bloodsheds, there would be people dying in elections, and from one polling stations open firings and so many casualties. Even then there are reported judgments that all right, in one constituency if somebody has died, that is not reason enough that rigging has taken place. God forbid, I am not saying that this is not reason enough, but previously even such instances of rigging have been overlooked. So, by far I feel that these elections have been conducted in a just and fair manner, and if somebody has any proofs and if somebody has documents, then the law provides that those be presented before the election tribunals, and thank God the election tribunals now consist of judges of high courts. They are not people who could be influenced by one political party or by any establishment for that matter. They are judges of the High Court.
Then why this emphasis to moving the Supreme Court?
I don't understand why and how you can move to the Supreme Court, because remember in 2013 the PTI leader had back then also filed a case directly before the Supreme Court asking for 30 constituencies, that out of these 30 constituencies they need to be opened up by the Supreme Court. This is not a case in which the Supreme Court should interfere this matter. How can it? Because the entire law of elections with experience of election petitions, almost in every constituency, this is a standard allegation. One person says there has been rigging, my form 45 is different from yours. So how do you verify this? The only way to verify this is to go before the election tribunal, where there would be evidence which would be led. So, I don't see that how and why special treatment should be given. If the law is bad, go change the law. For that, you have to form the government. For that, you have to be flexible.
Absolutely. With reference to your earlier statement that by and large these elections were free and fair or better than the previous ones, does that mean that with taking into account all of the allegations of rigging that we have so far, all of the constituencies that different political parties are questioning, there is no possibility of anything that would have impacted the results in any way, if we were to look at the allegations more closely, if there is any possibility of investigation of these results being anything different than what they are at the moment, it will not impact the overall results?
See,
yes, it's for you.
See, it is slightly unfortunate. Why it is unfortunate is because the matter of reserved seats is very important. And let's say after the election petitions are filed and 35 or 40 PTI candidates win those election petitions, those 40 people are, even if they are returned candidates, they would not get reserved seats. But yes, they may certainly be in a position tomorrow where they can form a government tomorrow. You see, election petitions are required to be decided in a period of 120 days. Yeah. It is a strict timeline. Yes, my colleagues will tell me that this might not strictly be followed, and they take 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes 5 years also. So I think what PTI and other parties should be focusing at, that all election petitions which are being presided over by judges of the high courts should be decided in 120 days. If that happens, then every party would be satisfied.
Right. So I want to understand one thing, and I'll take your perspective on this, Muneeb. If we even take a look at the timeline of 120 days, and of course the fact that this does go on longer than that in most cases as well. But even if we stick to 120 days and the earlier number of days that you mentioned, which is of course 21 from the date of the elections, then I want to understand that while we expect the political parties to go forward and form the government and be part of the parliament and of course go ahead with the formation of the government within those 21 days, and simultaneously we have 120 days to look at different constituencies and the allegations of rigging. I want to understand how these two reconcile, and not necessarily in terms of this particular election, but in general, if there are allegations of rigging, if there are political parties' concerns that the elections haven't been free and fair, then what is expected of the political parties to just go ahead and, regardless of those allegations or regardless of those reservations, continue and form the government within 21 days while these election tribunals keep on investigating, and then we'll see after 120 days what the results is and how it impacts. I just want to understand how that works.
Yeah, so that's a very valid question, given the current circumstances, and there's always a chance, actually, it's a very likely chance that the stalemate that was talked about by Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari today during his press conference, his interaction with the media, might persist. And, the 21-day lapse or the 120 days that is being talked about, no matter how many number of days, they might just pass on. All deadlines might be missed and skipped, and parties might not reach any compromise whatsoever because they would have very little incentive to do so. I think that all the political parties realize, very much PML-N and People's Party as well, that whatever government does come into power, if they were to cobble up, the required numbers and form a government at the center, the provinces, particularly at the center, would not be likely to very last. It could, collapse very soon because it would be resting on very thin foundation. So very little incentive that parties would have anyway to form a government, because a weak government is going to be weak on its performance, and they wouldn't want to take the brunt, or they wouldn't want to take the blame of running a failed government. So they are a bit wary of that as well, and so there is a very strong likelihood that perhaps nothing might come to fruition, no matter what deadline might pass by that time. But also, as far as rigging allegations concerned, again, Barrister Shabbir did talk about the fact that, in a way, if we were to look at the elections which have taken place in 2024, perhaps they were, in certain regards, much better than the previous ones. And because it's not the first time that we are listening to or hearing political parties, leveling allegations of electoral rigging. That's exactly what PML-N complained about in the last election, and that's exactly what Mr. Imran Khan used to give his dharnas for when the 2013 elections had happened. So these allegations have been going on for very long, but I also feel that we are living in the middle of a fake news epidemic, particularly with the advent of social media. Now that over the past 2 days, a video has gone viral where a journalist called Mr. Rai Saqib, he can be seen exposing some post-poll rigging, but it turns out that it's entirely fake and unfounded, and the documents that he's showing, supposedly as NA poll documents, are not on green paper, and there are other many irregularities in that video. But the way that PTI has been presenting, and their social media pages have been presenting this as some sort of gospel truth. And so many of the followers are also believing in this. So it's a bit lazy as well, particularly on PTI's part, that wherever they won the election, those constituencies, no electoral rigging took place. But they are again without any evidence whatsoever. They're claiming that they've won at least 180 NA seats. And so it's very convenient that where you haven't won, electoral rigging took place. Where you won, no electoral rigging took place. Look, the voter, they got the voter's mandate, and the public has given its verdict. You can't have your cake and eat it too. But also, I mean, it's not just the PTI; it's other parties as well, JUIF and Grand Democratic Alliance, which are alleging that electoral rigging took place. But if by and large, those parties, other than the PTI-backed independent candidates like People's Party and PML-N, they do feel that whatever votes they've been able to gather, PML-N 75 NA seats at least, and they can form a government between themselves, they might go ahead because they wouldn't want to perhaps aggravate the situation or the political situation anymore. And that is again something that Mr. Bhutto Zardari has warned about today. So, I mean, it could go both ways.
Right, absolutely. And Faisal, you're fond of sharing predictions post the show, but I thought maybe you can share some during the show today and let us know what do you think is going to happen in the country.
Yeah, this is what I'm seeing, that I think first time around, as obviously we heard Shabbir Shasaf as well and Muneeb as well, I think this time around there are extraordinary situations which are erupting right after the elections. And we have been seeing that since 2 years there were very extraordinary situations in Pakistan, and we saw that extraordinary measures were taken in past 2 years, in which of course courts were ordering that within 3 months the elections should be taking place, but they did not because extraordinary situations were faced. So here once more extraordinary situations would be requiring extraordinary decisions and measures. So what I am seeing is that unless all of these matters of huge importance, because this time around I agree with everyone that previously 2018, 2013, 2008, all of the elections, I mean rigging allegations were raised and they were addressed, but this time around it's very different. Why? Because there are a few of the candidates who actually were declared winners, but they came in front of the cameras and they said they are not the actual winners.
Right,
on the basis of, and there is another, and this has happened very first time. I would agree with Shabbir Shasaf when he says that of course these were the most peaceful elections, and obviously credit goes to Pakistan's security forces, Pakistan's army, Pakistan's intelligence services, Pakistan's police services. Everyone, they played their pivotal role on the day of election, and while the voting was taking place, they made sure that nothing takes place, and they did the brilliant job.
You've played with the periphery of my question, haven't given us any specifics, but I guess I'll leave
still,
it for next time.
Still, I believe that extraordinary measures would be taken. What are they? I'm still unsure.
Vague, but thanks. Thank you very much, Mr. Muneeb, for joining us. Thank you very much, Barrister Shabbir, for being part of the discussion. And thank you, Faisal. That's all we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.